Maybe we can start off by talking about your religious background.
Okay. Well, briefly, my family has left the Catholic Church when I was very young, and had a transformation in their own spiritual walk, per se, and as a young child, went through many different Protestant denominations and seeking for fellowship that they felt was where they wanted to be. And I think in the long run ended up really outside of the church, and not really kind of affiliated with any one specific denomination. A lot of home fellowships and non-denominational organizations that I grew up in. And I think that led to a real biblical, organic, clean perspective on the scriptures, on both the Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, all the prophets, as well as in the New Testament, looking at Israel and how many times Israel is the focus, is mentioned, is strewn throughout the scriptures. And so that had an impact on my parents. My parents went to Israel when I was in junior high, high school, for the International Christian Embassy, marches on Jerusalem during Sukkot. My father was very active, involved with many Zionist organizations, including the ZOA, other smaller groups. I think some of the different Jewish organizations and synagogues that had speakers coming in, he was involved with. And so I saw that growing up, and that had an impact on me. And as an undergraduate at the University of Arizona, I had an incredible opportunity to speak at a large synagogue in Tucson, Arizona during the Gulf War. And it was the first time I'd ever been in a synagogue. And I walked in, and it was a Tuesday night. The place was packed with Jewish leadership. Senator John McCain at the time was there. A lot of very influential people from throughout the community, both Christian and Jewish, looking for probably raising money for gas masks and things like that while the Scuds were falling on Tel Aviv. Many Jewish leadership were speaking of their own travels to Israel during this Gulf War time. And so it was a whole eye-opening experience for me to be sitting in that synagogue with so many people, and they opened up the microphone for Q&A and for statements, and I got up and spoke. I would say, as a Christian, that was really the Holy Spirit, or the Ruach HaKodesh, that gave me this kind of stamina and a way to stand up and speak in this place. And just with the microphone, and I said, listen, I'm a poor college student, I don't have money to give. I can't give money to the organization, but I can give my hands and feet. And I want to give my time. And I want to volunteer for Israel. I know there's programs out there, and I want to go. I want to be able to take other Christians of like mind to Israel to do something. This is horrific what's happening with the Scuds from Saddam Hussein. And with that, I got this standing ovation. I said, Christians need to stand up, never again allow this to happen on our watch. And people came up to me later, and an elderly woman who was a Holocaust survivor came up and was crying and gave me a big hug. And it was just an amazing experience. And a professor came to me and said, young man, I want to see you in my office in a couple of days. And so I went to meet with this man. He was a professor of water resource management. He was an Israeli who had come to Tucson, Arizona, which is, by the way, on the same parallel as Jerusalem. So the deserts of Arizona are quite similar to the deserts of Israel. And he said, I want you to have a scholarship, some scholarship opportunity to go to the Hebrew University. So it's a long way of saying how I got to Israel, but that opportunity opened itself, and I was able to get a Raoul Wallenberg scholarship to go to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem for my junior year. And that year, changed my life. It was quite incredible to be living at the Hebrew University of Mount Scopus and studying. Took some Hebrew Ulpan, also took some of my regular courses for my degree, which was history and religious studies, so it made quite a bit of sense to be in Israel. That's a long answer to your question, but that's kind of in a short way of my progression of how I came to my own spiritual awakening as a Christian to the Hebraic roots of a very Jewish Messiah that the church has de-Judaized in many, many ways. And so I feel foreign to this kind of institution called the church, the organized church.
Why not convert to Judaism?
Good question. And I have gone through that in my mind many times. I kind of contemplated that with conservative rabbis, and it was so it made so much sense. But yet at the same time, I think the religion that I was throwing away was the religion. The relationship that I feel I have with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is pure and is true. And that's really what I was seeking. I wasn't seeking another religiosity of trappings and traditions. I love it, and I think that there's biblical roots of all the Jewish religion, but there's also some rabbinical things that have kind of gotten mixed in, just like the church has had men institute and insert themselves over thousands of years of things changing. So that's one of the reasons I didn't think I needed to pick up something else, even though it is biblical, established by God with Moses, and all of these things laid down in the Torah. It makes sense to adopt, but yet to put myself under another veil of religiosity to try to please and perform wasn't really what I was looking for.
What do you suppose is the predominant motivation of Christian Zionists in America and around the world?
Yeah, it is interesting because, when I was in Israel in 91, 92, for the Feast of Tabernacles, the Sukkot time frame, I saw so many international people coming from all over the globe, and I thought the same thing. I was like, this is amazing that this scope and size of the love for Israel coming from Christians from different cultures, not just America, was dumbfounding. And I said the only thing that I could attribute it to is the all-encompassing love from Hashem. I think from God Almighty, that's the connecting factor, and that when people shed religiosity from their little church or their little institution and actually look at the scriptures and incorporate that into their own heart and really seek to follow God in their lives, that can only lead them to Israel. And I think that is because they have been robbed of the Jewish culture, of the Hebraic roots of the scriptures, because it was so de-Judaized under Constantine and throughout the history of the Catholic Church, and then the Protestant Reformation, and then what Martin Luther said was so anti-Semitic at the end of his life. So this is a new awakening of sorts that is coming truly out of the hearts of these believers who are looking at it in a fresh new way. And that's the connection I can only see. I mean, there's no other explanation for it, because it's not like somebody sent out an email or a tweet to say, oh, let's all love Israel now because it's the cool thing to do. It's the flavor of the month. No, doesn't make sense.
How does Christianity break down into denominations that either support Zionism and Eretz Yisrael as compared to those who oppose Israel and seek to carve a Palestinian state out of Judea and Samaria and Gaza?
Yeah, good question. Because it is such a myriad, large, confusing, crazy separation. But the short answer for that would be, in my opinion, the larger and more organized and more the older institutions, like obviously some of the Catholic Church has some issues and has some history of anti-Semitism. Obviously, everyone knows the history of the Catholic Church and the horrific events that took place under the guise of Catholicism, which would be separate from Christianity, in my opinion. Then you look at some of the larger Protestant denominations, the Lutherans, the Methodists, the Anglican churches that are in England and in Europe and in America, and even some of the Mennonite organizations that are very peace now, peace loving, and non-confrontational. They think that the underdog is the Palestinian, and these folks are so misinformed because they're only getting their information from the media or from the world as opposed to scriptures, and looking into them and saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense with what Pastor so-and-so or Father so-and-so is saying, because it doesn't line up with scripture. So that's the disconnect. I think some of there are large evangelical churches which are on board with the Zionism. So I don't want to say, oh, if you have a certain number of congregants that you're going to be over the top. But I would say the well-established, older, well-organized, large Christian denominations are the ones that are probably spiritually dead and missing a lot of where Israel fits in to everything that you have been taught as a Christian and as a Jew. How does this fit? So that's the answer that I would give.
How much of the motivation for Christian support of Israel has to do with end times prophecy?
I think that probably you can't discount that. It factors in. I think that it says in the scriptures that Jerusalem will become a heavy stone for all of the nations, and all the nations will rise up against Jerusalem and come against it. And now I think we're seeing our own nation do that. I think that we've had an about face in our own. State Department's been like that for a long time, but the administration currently and many even Republican, Democrat throughout have kind of had a quasi relationship, friendship, but if in their heart of hearts it comes down to this kind of world peace now to carve out a Jewish Palestinian state from Israel, I think that most people hard pressed in governments would do that. So back to the question of is it end times prophecy? I think initially a lot of people will look at that and say, well, yeah, that's why Israel is important. But I think even if the further you look at this and the longer you look at what the prophets spoke about, what the Torah speaks about, and then you look at that and say, in the context of the New Testament, and say, this all completely ties together, and Israel has been and always will be an integral part of everything. It's the center of the universe. It's the center of the world. It's God's apple of His eye. And when you touch it or you condemn it, you can see throughout history, not about end times, but throughout history, the repercussions that every government, every empire has ever had. Where are they today? And America is not immune. So.
But is Christian Zionist support for Israel largely based on the expectation that the reformation of Israel is going to lead to the return of Jesus?
I think that, yeah, I mean, if you look at that, I mean, I personally, that was not my motivation ever. I think it was out of my upbringing, my understanding of my own relationship, and how I came to know the Lord and understand that in my own life. I think that if you look at the world today and you look at the miraculous birth of Israel in 1948 and how a nation was born in a day and the prophetic fulfillment, you can't, even if you're a moderately affiliated Jew or Christian kind of going through just barely affiliated, I think you can look at the world and say there is some serious lineups with prophetic things that Israel was coming back on the stage after 2,000 years of longing to come back to Jerusalem. So yes, I think that you can't say that it doesn't play a role. I don't think for me and for many others that it's the primary role. It's like, no, it's like here we are for such a time as this, and wherever you are, whether Jesus comes back 1,000 years from now or 50 years from now or 10, it doesn't matter, who cares? You are living now in a time where you have to speak your mind and speak it boldly, speak the truth in love, and be a support, because it doesn't matter when He's coming back, for me. Because we don't know, I don't really care. I just have to know that I'm doing the right thing in my life.
But are Christian Zionists supporting Israel with the notion that there's going to be this apocalyptic war which is going to bring the Messiah?
Yeah, and I think that would be the case anyways, that's part of the Christian theological idea. When you look at the book of Revelation, when you look at end time scenario, that's part of the belief that at some point Mashiach is coming back to reign as ruler and king. The first Messiah.
But is that going to come as part of an Ezekiel 38 type Armageddon?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, yes. I mean, I think that there's probably going to be some battle in Armageddon. I mean, that has been prophesied by Ezekiel. And whether you interpret it as end times or not, I think that there's probably going to be some kind of battle that is involved with the Middle East, and that now that we're addicted to oil, now that we're so tied in with the Muslim nations that hate us, you can see how like God is setting things up that is just bizarre, and that you've got this tiny little Jewish nation, a thorn in those nations' side that hate them. And we as Americans, with Christians and Jews living side by side for 235 years, synagogues and churches, in the most free, economically strong, militarily strong nation on the face of the planet in history, is the one nation that has stood by Israel's side, has supported it, and has helped maybe in the creation of it to some degree, a large degree. And here we are watching things change currently where our relationship could grow cold. And what does that mean for Jews in America, for Christians who support the Jews and love the Jews? You know, in my mind, I think it's in Zechariah that says, in those times, 10 Gentiles will grab hold of a Jew and say, take me with me, for your God is true.
Take me with...
Take me with you. So 10 Gentiles grab a hold of the Jew and say, take us with you. You know,
to where?
To go probably to Israel. You know, right now that's not possible. But I think there are many people probably here at this conference in D.C. or that are around the globe that, if given the opportunity, would gladly hand in their passport to Denmark, to America, to Australia, to say, I'll go work the land, I'll live on a kibbutz, I'll live side by side, even though scuds are falling, Iran, whatever's coming. Doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, it's in a way, I look at what's going on in Israel, and I look at it as like a global hatred. There's this seething anti-Semitism that people can cloak in anti-Israel, but yet at its core, it's no different from what was going on in Europe in the 30s. This kind of, you know, the neighbor who you lived next door to and you had your little shop, all of a sudden is saying, you know, it's time for you to leave. You know, so this kind of, it's like on a global scale now, and it's like we're seeing this happen where, you know, the nation of Israel is having to kowtow to the world's demands of saying Jews have to leave this land because it's an obstacle to peace, or that you can't have the right to live on that land because you're causing a problem. That is unbelievable, and the fact that it's being said and being believed and being allowed to continue is such unbelievable, horrific. It's like, you know, all of a sudden Jews were removed from schools or from businesses, slowly etched out of German society, and people just let it happen. And it's like, what do they say? That a frog will never jump out of a boiling pot of water as you slowly boil it. But if you throw a frog on top of a boiling cauldron of water, it will jump off. So here we are. It's another slow boil that we're watching.
Of growing anti-Semitism. Exactly.
Of global anti-Semitism that is cloaked in anti-Israel sentiment because of peace. And you've got Jewish people, you've got Christian people, you've got atheists, Buddhists, and Muslims, and you know Chinese, Shinto, and whatever, all over the globe have an opinion, and it's usually pretty negative.
Would you say that your ethical compass is being influenced by your prophetic aspiration?
My ethical compass, meaning, explain that though.
Well, the notion that Israel may be behaving unethically, but you'll support her in sickness or in health.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, I mean, Israel, like every other government of the world, is still run by human beings, and we're all faulty. You know, we're not perfect. And so just like I would condemn my own government, whether I voted them in or not, I would, you know, stand firm against something that I would disagree with. Still means that I'm an American citizen, I pay my taxes, I have to go about my business. So likewise with Israel, I think to show support and love and unconditional love for my fellow brother the Jew, whether in America or in Israel, is one level, but then on a political or geopolitical level to say that I endorse everything that Israel is doing as a government, as a nation, is another level. I think there's the personal level that you can have as a personal interaction with each individual person that you come into contact with in your life, but on a geopolitical level, yeah, I mean, you can disagree. I mean,
But by and large, do you believe that Israel is unethical, immoral society, as it's being alleged by members of the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement?
Absolutely not. It's no different from America. I would say, as far as our Judeo-Christian values that have founded this country and that have probably established a code of ethics and a moral structure that exists in this country that is probably being slowly decayed. I think Israel has very, very strong, similar approaches to family, to life, to the value of human life, and
its moral code.
In its moral code.
And its moral code is the same as ours.
Exactly, exactly. There's no difference in the mindset because they're looking at the same text that were founded by our founding fathers, you know, and it's probably even more so because it's in their DNA for thousands of years. More, where they've held on to that through ghettos and crusades and all these things. So it's part of who they are, and now they have this nation they've longed for 2,000 years since Titus had kicked them out in 70 AD. So now they're back, and so yes, their value of human life, their love of people and of the land and of their brethren. You can see that in the way they treat Muslims, Arabs, Christians, atheists in their hospitals from around the region, and that's never reported on CNN or Fox. Or
when you say treat them, you mean the quality of treatment, or that they give them medical treatment?
Both, I would say. That you could have an Orthodox Jew in one room who's getting a heart surgery, and an Arab Muslim in the next that's getting open heart surgery, and there's no difference. There's not like, okay, well, this guy gets the secondary nurses and whatever, or the doctors after they're done with the Jew. It doesn't happen. It's a normal value of human life that, and they would treat the terrorist and try to save that individual's life on the streets. They drop leaflets to help get rid of collateral damage, so that men, women, and children that are innocent, that are not doing anything, holding guns, shooting at Israeli soldiers, can get out of the way. And you know what government does that? What military does that? You know, drop leaflets and text them and call them and say we're gonna be coming in 5 minutes. You better get out of that building. That should right there speak volumes.
What would you say to Christians who are unfamiliar with Israel and are only going based on what they heard on NBC or CNN?
I would say wake up. That everything is changing, and it's God Almighty who's bringing about these changes and these awakenings, because Israel exists, because the nation is thriving, the nation is alive, the nation is successful, the nation is growing and prospering, just as the scriptures have said from thousands of years ago. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. It's a reality. So this lie that has been given to the world that Israel is Goliath and the Palestinians are David is such a lie, right, I would say, out of the pits of hell, that it's trying to deceive the world to say black is white and white is black, and that's not true. So if you're truly an honest Christian and you want to understand what Jesus means to you, what does Israel mean to you, what does the global situation of tumult that is happening in the Middle East, then you need to really go back to the scriptures and look at the prophets and look at what they say, and not listen to the media and not listen to maybe what your preconceiving notions are, but to understand it in a different light.
But are you saying that Christians should support Israel because it's a biblical mandate, or because it's morally right?
I wouldn't want someone just to say I support Israel because my pastor said so or because it's biblically correct. I would want, and I think that most of the people that you're going to find here at this conference or at different organizations that support Israel in a real way, it's coming out of their heart. It's not just a mental thing that, oh, I read this and so therefore this. No, it's something much deeper. It's like, what do they say? The second mind is your gut. Go with your gut. And if it's not in your gut, it can't be here. You know what I mean? It's like it's got to come truly out of your own heart. And I think the only way your heart can go there is by some kind of deep understanding and concern for Israel and for the Jew, and you know, I think that can come from many different ways, and you know, I think even before I had this yearning deep within me, but I think one of the things that kind of culminated it for me, and I'll tell a little quick story here because it's kind of pertinent. I was fortunate enough to go from Israel to Poland on March of the Living in 1992. Is the mic still working? Yeah. So I was able to go to Poland with, you know, a large cohort of young, mostly Jewish people from all over the world, and I went with some of my friends from Israel who were studying. We were from the States, and I was able to see the Warsaw Ghetto. We went through Treblinka, through Auschwitz, through Birkenau, through many different decimated Jewish communities throughout Poland, as well as all of the camps. And we had survivors on our bus. And the way that I describe that experience is something that I'm trying to get at, is that the Christian who understands it with their head is one thing, and that's great. That's maybe the first starting point. But to be able to understand it with your heart is something different. It's something more emotional, something deeper. And I think as I drove through Poland and I saw these nice little manicured graveyards with churches and flowers, and then we drove down around the corner, and then there's Auschwitz and Birkenau mass graves, you know, Zyklon B bunkers, concrete bunkers. And I thought to myself, how in the world could those people call themselves Christians as they sat in those churches in the 40s while the smell of burning flesh was coming into their place of worship? And it made me want to vomit, really vomit. Because I said, I don't want to be associated with those Christians, if that's what they call themselves. And I said to myself, never again. I want to be able to be strong enough and to be stable enough to say, I will go with you and I must stand with you regardless of what comes. And that's, I think, going to be the dividing line. And Israel is going to be, I think, a line in the sand that Hashem is drawing for the world, and said, are you with us or are you not? And it has nothing to do with theology or with what religious little name you call yourself. Reform, Reconstructionist, Orthodox, Southern Baptist, Lutheran, Christian, Catholic.
You think God will judge Christians on how they treat Israel?
Absolutely, I think. I think that their heart, He knows their heart. Doesn't matter if you wrote a check. Doesn't matter if you just wrote a check to support Israel because
that's good enough.
No. Writing a check and thinking you're done, you know, that's nice, and maybe that's helpful, but I think God knows your heart. Where does your heart stand? Who are you? How will you help the poor, the victims within your own community? And this is more of the Christian understanding of how to love your neighbor as yourself. But I think before you can do that, you've got to understand who you are in the Lord and understand what does that mean to you. So yeah, I think it's going to be a clear delineation, and that there are going to be many Christians and many Jews who probably choose the wrong side and say, you know what, Israel is a problem and it's not my problem, and they've got to go fix something because I can't worry about it. So
what would be the fate of those people?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what God has planned for the end or what the culmination of things are. But I think that, you know, you talked earlier about the Armageddon. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's not so inconceivable in this day and age to think that a nuclear bomb from Iran could drop on this city that we're sitting in, and this could be completely pulverized. We did it 60, 70 years ago to Japan. It can be done. And it probably will be done. And those that think it won't probably have their head in the sand. And
who would do it and why?
I think you'd have a radical Muslim terrorist with nukes in their capability to hit the great Satan, America, and the little Satan, Israel. Whether Israel gets hit first, we get hit, I don't know. I don't know what the fate's going to be, but all I know is that, and all I can account for is myself and my own heart, and where do I stand with God, and what am I doing as a 42-year-old American man to do the right thing every day and to love people and to help where I can. And if I get pulverized by a nuclear bomb, then that's my fate. It doesn't mean that because I loved Israel, I'm going to be miraculously saved. you know, from nuclear holocaust or something.
Well, in this world.
Right, exactly. And that would be another theological discussion that you could have with a Jewish, you know, person to say, well, what do you feel is the afterlife, and what is God planning, and, you know, what will we become? I think you can find a lot of interesting things for, you know, different throughout the scriptures, in the Hebrew scriptures, of, you know, coming back to life and all these different things, you know, resurrection, and there is that theme throughout the Jewish scriptures in the Torah. I don't know exactly where they are. I'm not totally a scholar, but I understand that that's coming from many of the scriptures. That, who knows? You know, I believe that. I believe that we're going to have this kind of Gan Eden existence that He intended from the beginning, with the people that He has chosen, but have also chosen Him. You know, and I think that's going to be the demarcation, the delineation. You know, you're chosen, but you also have to choose Him and do the right thing.
And in this case, what's the right thing?
I would say to love your neighbor as yourself, to be, you know, the whole concept of tikkun olam is great within Judaism, but I think, and that's kind of the goal, you know, like in the heart of people, to make the world a better place, but recognizing that we as humans are not going to bring that in. I think the Mashiach will usher in the true tikkun olam, and to cleanse the world of however that's going to happen, I don't know, so that the lion will lay down with the lamb, that there will be this kind of peace that is unknown, and not with a White House decree peace. That's not real peace, or, you know, Camp David peace. Those aren't peace. I mean, or, you know, whatever happened after World War II and World War I, those aren't real peace, because we will be continually fighting and hurting one another, because that's the human condition. So,
how do you feel the war against Israel factors into the larger global jihad among the Wahhabist and Iranian Islamist imperialist movement? How does Israel factor in, and what's the connection, you think, for America's future based on what happens to Israel?
Yeah, I think that the global jihad movement, and I've heard many experts estimate that, you know, looking at the Muslim population of the world, and then taking 10–15% of that, which are radicalized in different Sunni, Shiite sects, you're talking about 150 million or more radical Muslims that really have a global caliphate type of mentality, that the Islamic world needs to take back what was taken from them. It includes Europe, which they've done a pretty good job of subversively incorporating their Sharia-type existence in many cities, and we saw that with Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, and you've seen many things in London taking place. And I think with the number of mosques that have been built over the last 20–30 years, and even in America, you have seen this slow creeping Sharia, where they're not doing it by, you know, the Ottoman way with the sword of that Ottoman Empire. They're doing it much more subversively. They're using our own rights and freedoms to manipulate for themselves within our own country. And the left and the liberal left is saying, hey, this is great, you know, it's kind of, they're in bed. The liberal left the socialist Marxism is in bed with this kind of thing because it's politically correct, and, you know, we're dependent on oil, we want to be nice to the Saudis and to all these people, but yet what's happening is they're going to be the first ones lined up when it all comes down and when it hits the fan. And so that kind of approach, and with Israel really on the front lines in the crosshairs, and the fact that a Jewish state is in their midst is such an affront to their religious beliefs, and it's a thorn in their side. And the fact that America, the great Satan, is supporting financially and in many ways, and other political ways, for many decades, is even more of a problem. So I think that if and when the U.S. support of Israel goes away in order to appease and kowtow to the Islamic, quote unquote, you know, modern Islamic world that is kind of parading itself to us, then and only then things are going to drastically change, where I think Israel might be the last beacon of freedom. And just talking a little bit about, within the Christian world, there are many perspectives that Christians take on Israel. And one of the biggest lies within the Christian church right now, and this teaching that has kind of worked its way in over the last 150 years or so, or maybe even longer than that, is replacement theology, where the Christian looks at the scriptures and wherever they see the word Israel, they replace it with the church. Meaning, the organized church and the Christian community has now replaced Israel's promises that God gave to Abraham. And that because the Jewish people at large rejected Messiah, that these Gentiles who have now come into an understanding of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and learned all of the history of the monotheistic faith and have now said, well, now because they didn't get it, we get it. So they've kind of just switched, almost like switched the blessing. Like, we got it now. And it's replacement theology. And it's really been one of the biggest cancers within the church because it has caused such anti-Semitism. So that's why I think it's much older than 150 years. It's probably back to the early Catholic Church. And I don't know exactly when it all started, but it really started probably with Constantine and de-Judaizing things and switching things to Sunday. And then you got Christmas trees and Easter bunnies. And what the heck does that have anything to do with a Jewish Messiah? Nothing. You know what I mean? So it's been so paganly infiltrated, and one of those things was replacement theology. And within America, there's this thing called the emerging church, which is also really bad, where you're starting to mingle and marry all religions and kind of, let's have a kumbaya moment and a little yin and yang and a little Christianity, a little, Judaism, a little Buddhism, a little, whatever, a little yoga. Yeah, exactly. And so it's kind of, let's come together and worship together and put our differences aside, which is kind of hokey. It's a little bit nerve-wracking.
Is there an element of replacement theology in that emerging church movement?
Oh, yeah. I think that they probably would have to adhere to that in the beginning to say that, okay, because as the emerging church is growing and Israel is over here suffering, and all of the negative anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism that's going on, and they're just kind of having a little kumbaya moment, creating a new kind of religious fervor with everybody multiculturally coming together. So I think replacement theology is probably somewhere involved with the Christians that are in the leadership of that to some degree. Now, I can't speak for all of those folks that are doing that, but I would say that somewhere that they probably have bought into that.
What would you say to those who believe in replacement theology?
To go back to the scriptures and look at what it says and try to take off these religious glasses that you've been given and put them down and really ask God to give you some kind of deeper understanding and read them for yourselves and maybe go read them and go to Israel and take a trip to Israel and walk the land of our forefathers and look at what was taking place in that land, because I think that in and of itself, a trip to Israel is transformative for the Jew, for a God-fearing Christian, I think for even an atheist, because I've talked to them that have been to Israel and they've said, they had some kind of, there's something spiritually connected to that real estate, to that land. And no one can explain it. You can't, it's not logical, but there's something about it. I think that God declared, that God decided way back when Abraham, bought the lot, and so I think that from that time forward, it has a special place in God's heart. It has a special place on the planet, which is why the world is fighting over it, which is why the world is so hateful towards it. Because if they can get rid of God and any kind of power that has a plan, that has some kind of organization and plan, and also has some kind of law or some kind of line in the sand that says this is black and this is white, this is right and this is wrong. If they can get rid of that, then they can do what they want. The world can have it as they please. So to remove the Jew, to remove Israel, is to remove God. God Almighty sovereignty that says, I created you, I have a plan for you, and that's not going to change, even though the world will want to try to rid itself of that.
But do Zionistic Christians see themselves as the replacement to the Jews, inheritors of Israel?
No, 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 no. The replacement theology camp is kind of like, you know, their perspective, and I think this is probably going to answer some questions for many Jewish people. Their perspective is that the entire Jewish community in the Jewish world needs to come to their church and accept Jesus and become a Christian. That's replacement theology working. A Christian Zionist who has awakened to their own roots of a Jewish Messiah, this guy named Jesus from Nazareth, and understanding him in a different context away from this church teachings which are false, which have been paganized and religiosity that has created, and kind of shedding that old skin and coming into a new wineskin and understanding of who they are, is a Christian Zionist. And there is no agenda. There's no like saying, oh, well, we have to go save the Jew, or we have to, you know, because I've had friends of mine saying, oh, Chris, well, that's wonderful.
When you say save, meaning convert.
Right, exactly. Go, you know, tell them that they have to, you know, believe in Jesus as their Messiah and all that. Because you know what? That's not my issue. My issue is my own soul and my own love and what I feel God telling me to do. If a Jewish person is on their own spiritual journey and becoming more Torah abiding and more kosher or more observant in their own Judaism, then that's their path. And I think these paths are coming together because there are many Jews who are coming into their own understanding as a Jew and saying, what does it mean to me to be a Jew? And it's not simply doing certain things, maybe. You know, all the trappings and things that we do in religion have meaning and have purpose, but there's something also beyond that, beyond just, you know, not eating bacon and, you know, those laws of kashrut and all those things have meaning and have purpose, but yet they drive you to something greater, which is a pure relationship with God. And I think those things are going to converge at some point. However they converge, it's not my problem. I don't know about it, and I'm not going to worry about it. You know what I mean? But I think this is the culmination, and this would be my ending statement, because I think this is the coolest thing. I think that the story of Joseph is somehow going to play its role in modern times. And that, I mean, Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers and then became such high stature in Egypt, was second in command to Pharaoh. And then his brothers are brought into Egypt because of the famine in land, in Canaan. And it was Israel's at that time. It was already Israel at that time, yeah. So they were already coming into Egypt looking for sustenance and food. They didn't recognize their brother because he looked so Gentile. He looked so foreign. And that reunion that came, and the weeping and the sobbing of this reunification, I think, is the way I look at what's happening now. And I don't know how that plays out with the DNA, but that these Christians who are shedding their Gentile Christianity and this religiosity that has bound them to some lies and pagan rituals and all these crazy things that have been so foreign to Israel and to the Jew, and the Jew who is coming out and understanding their own relationship to Hashem and coming together and probably in a more orthodox way. And I'm not saying that there's one group of Jews that are getting it right, because we all have our own perspective on God. And I think it doesn't mean you have to do this certain way or do this certain thing. But I think wherever the Jew is, wherever this Christian is, Israel and the connection is going to come. And there's going to be this kind of amazing family reunion of sorts that only God can figure it out. Because I don't know. But that's the picture.
But are we going to have to waste away in jail for it to happen?
I know. Well, I think out of pain comes learning and growth. And I think that we all have to be willing to go through whatever God has in store for us. And
whatever Joseph's brothers had to go through.
Exactly. Whatever Joseph went through. You know, Joseph went through getting sold into slavery and being in prison and all that hellacious experience, but then God redeemed him and saved him and brought him to this incredible stature that nobody could have figured out, nobody could have made happen. And then what his brothers did, and the guilt and what they had to endure with their father and all of that. So I think on both sides there's pain, there's growth, there's learning, but ultimately, and I don't know the answer, and I don't think anybody does. And so a Christian or a Jew who says they do, okay, God bless. But I think in the end, there's going to be such an incredible joy in a family reunion that only God can bring about.
But we've got to stick to it.
Yeah. We've got to stick to it. We've got to stick together.
Stick to our guns.
Stick to our guns and stick together, come hell or high water, whatever happens. So that's Zeu.
Sehr cool.
Zeu. Sehr cool.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you very much.